was young, I had an experience that marked the beginning of my life at the same time as nearly ending it. I was on a trip in Colorado. I'd only been climbing about a year. This one day, we were going to go climb in this beautiful sandstone canyon with orange and red cliffs rising above a small creek. As we were gearing up at the car, I realized I'd forgotten my harness. Since not climbing that day was not an option, we took some webbing from the pile of gear, wrapped it around my waist and legs, and called it good. Just so you know, you should never do this. Except in a dire emergency, which this was not. This was, in fact, a terrible idea. Hours later, as we were a few hundred feet off the ground, I offered to take the lead. I started climbing until I couldn't any longer. I had gotten off route. Then I froze. I yelled down to my friends, but they were like far below and out of range, and so completely worthless. It was a really hot day. I remember the sun was at my back, and my fingertips hanging on these little edges felt like they were dipped in butter, like kind of just greasing off, and sweat was kind of rolling down my face and stinging my eyes. And then, lucky me, my harness, made out of that shit webbing and haphazardly wrapped around my waist in the parking lot, fell to my ankles. Yeah, that's when things got serious. To salvage my life, I would have to stand there on this 4-inch ledge, a couple hundred feet off the ground, and somehow shimmy my harness back up and kind of make sense of it, all the while without tipping back. And then I'd have to down climb something I had barely been able to climb up. This would have been hard if it was 2 inches off of the ground. Standing there, though, I saw my body fall down the cliff with remarkable clarity. I could feel it. I felt the air. I could see the ledges my body was going to hit. I could feel the closing of my consciousness. What's remarkable is that it was not morbid. It was enlightening. I'd found in this moment not a shot of adrenaline, but an ocean of lucidity. And I haven't written about it much, despite being a writer for the past 25 years. Up until this point, I'd gone to church. But if religion is a way to explore our mortality, this was the first time I had really gone to church. I had an insight. I matured years in those 10 minutes. I would quit drugs for climbing. I had a drug problem at the time. I would devote my life to it. I would move across the country for it. Here's me last year climbing in the Canyonlands. This is in Sicily. Last year, I think, where my family's from in Italy. This is doing some ice climbing in the Colorado Rockies. Again, some more ice climbing, getting the ice chips all on your face. You got to lean back. And again in Sicily. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. That moment, though, when I was 14, I had held my life in my hands without fear, without compromise, and without distraction, without any fantasy that my life wasn't mine. Now, not everyone is going to take the risks that I do, but I can tell you, you cannot take the risk out of life. In fact, you need to walk toward it. That's what I'm going to defend today, the ability and necessity to live without guardrails. We are becoming a risk-adverse society, and the impulse towards safety and certainty is now being extended to our parks, wild places, and psychological landscapes in between. We are smothering the very thing we love about the mountains, and nature, for that matter. National parks are seeing record numbers of visitors, and that influx has created a novel problem. Do we keep the wild wild, or do we change these landscapes so they become extensions of our urban environments? It seems we're moving towards the latter. Increasingly, national parks are being sued for not making wild places safe enough. For instance, in the Pacific Northwest, a 63-year-old man was attacked and killed by a wild and very large mountain goat. So his family sued. You can read about dozens of lawsuits of trees falling on people near campgrounds or around campgrounds. It's happening on private property too, but with a twist. A wild migrating bird decided to swoop on into Disney World and get in a tiff with a female visitor. She was injured in the encounter and later sued the park. In all these cases, it was said they should have removed the wild mountain goat. They should have cut down the dead trees. They should have managed the wild migrating bird. Really? I mean, I would love to see how Disney World is going to pull that one off. I mean, it's like kind of like what's next? Like someone's driving home from work and, hits a deer, sues the state. Well, Judge, we expect the state to have trained its wild animals better. I mean, that's kind of like going to the pool and suing the swim club because you got wet. Because of these cases, parks are resorting to an extreme form of coddling. In the Death Valley in California, there is a sign warning people of heat danger, with nothing less than a road sign in the middle of the trail. And as if the name Death Valley or the suffocating heat you are definitely experiencing while reading that sign weren't a strong enough clue. Other greatest hits include don't feed the wild bears and wet rocks are slippery. One of my favorites is prohibiting high heels when you're climbing mountains. Consider yourself warned, okay? All these cases illustrate that we are just out of touch with natural places. We're an urban population. 83% of us live in urban environments. We believe that these landscapes are extensions of our city. For instance, in 2018, the mayor of the climbing town of Chamonix in France did something that hadn't been done before, ever. He required those attempting to climb Mont Blanc, the highest peak in Europe, to carry certain equipment. Whereas before, it was okay if you climbed with the gear you saw fit based on your capability and performance level. Now you could be fined and face legal consequences if you did not have the right equipment. The mayor justified his rationale by saying Mont Blanc had become, quote, an urban space of commerce. His decree produced some excellent protest, one of my favorites being by the legendary mountain athlete Kilian Jornet. Though I wouldn't recommend it, though I think I would, because it looks kind of awesome. And cold. But here's the problem with reactionary policies like these. If park managers are required to keep parks safe in order to keep us safe, then we will wake up to find that the things we can do in these places will be severely limited, and the places themselves will be fundamentally changed. And the wild will, in a sense, completely cease to exist. In 2018, 6 people died on Capitol Peak. Capitol Peak is a 14er near my hometown, a peak I've climbed solo and considered to be one of the deadliest in the state. The majority of accidents that happen on Capitol Peak happen in the same manner and often in the same spot. People are usually really tired at this one point on the ridge, either from on their way up or on their way down. And when you look down, you think you can see a little shortcut, like you could butt slide down to the lake below where most people's water and food is. So people take that route. However, you end up getting cliffed out, as climbers call it, when you cannot go down anymore because of a cliff, right? You can't do it. The majority of those who had accidents here realized it was too late when, in fact, it was too late. After an accident happens on this mountain, public outcry is loud and primitive. Politicians call the situation out of hand and demand spray paint and placards, right, and signs on the mountain. Just put a goddamn sign up, is the collective sentiment. But I disagree. As the former editor-in-chief of Rock and Ice and Ascent magazines, two of some of the best magazines to have been published in the climbing world, I've lost numerous friends and colleagues to the mountains. I've written about accidents for years. I've had gut-wrenching interviews with fathers and mothers who have lost sons and daughters, park rangers who had to pick the pieces up, literally, and best friends who saw it happen. When writing these reports, I kind of have to act like a detective. I have to inhabit the scene. I have to look at what gear was left, what knots were used, what was the psychological mentality of these individuals and why they made certain decisions and didn't make other decisions. Because of that, these people haunt me, these individuals haunt me to this very day, years later. I dream about them, in fact. After the deaths on Capitol Peak, I spoke to Scott Fitzwilliams. He is the supervisor of the area where Capitol Peak resides. And he was clear. Once you start guardrailing the sides of mountains, you remove the wilderness experience for everybody. What I can tell you is this. The thrust to make mountains safer is not coming from the climbing community. Just as surfers are not demanding the ocean floor be re-engineered for safer waves. It is in general not coming from the family and friends who have lost loved ones there. It is in general not coming from the Park Service. While all this is a novel debate for the mountains, it is an old question, framed by Alexander Hamilton in 1787, is that between liberty and security. Of his fellow Americans, Hamilton said, "To be more safe, they at length become willing to run the risk of being less free." Notice how for Hamilton, the real risk is in being less free. If we continue to view natural landscapes as extensions of our cities, then we have redefined what the mountains have been for centuries, as places where we encounter and overcome adversity, where risk is woven into the fabric of the landscape. What concerns me is that if we succumb to these trends, we will have redefined ourselves in relation to fear, and we will have smothered the very organic and creative uncertainty that life provides. In order to protect free speech, we need to make room for dangerous speech. Not because we like dangerous speech, but if we only allowed safe speech, then we'd undermine what a free society looks like. Likewise, we need to make space for risk in order to protect our freedoms. Freedom can only be defined in what you are free from. In the mountains, we are free from productivity, prying eyes, street cameras, texts, public aggression, from the compulsion to wear clean socks every day, from the assumption that life's okay, and if we just wait, it's safe and certain, it's just going to work out. But that's never really true, is it? Safety is an illusion. And it is only in the process of radical freedom, when we sober up, that life's grandest illusion is dissolved. I am going to continue to seek out these moments of lucidity. And while I do not need to climb the remote wilderness to find them, though I would prefer that, it sure is nice to have the option. Keeping the wild ensures that option for all of us. It also ensures we can find the wild in us. In these moments, we are free to hold our lives gently in our hands. And that's as it should be. Thank you.